Welcome to AI in Design, where we explore how artificial intelligence is reshaping the world of design.
I'm Nick Martellero.
And I'm Dan Staffer, and we're faculty at Carnegie Mellon's Human-Computer Interaction Institute.
Each week, we break down the latest AI developments, dive deep into topics that matter to designers, and talk with fascinating guests who are right at the intersection of these fields.
And whether you're a designer working with AI or an AI practitioner who's interested in design, we're glad you're here. So on today's episode, we're going to be discussing
Microsoft's Copilot Checkout, a new feature that lets US shoppers complete purchases directly inside of Copilot without ever leaving the chat window.
Google's A2UI, which stands for Agent to User Interface. It's an open source specification that allows AI agents to generate user interfaces on the fly.
And straight from CES, a holographic AI desk companion from Razer.
And we'll wrap up today by doing our AI in design predictions for 2026. But first, let's get to this week's top AI in design stories, starting with Microsoft's Copilot Checkout.
So, Dan, I saw this story and I thought, as a first perspective, this is going to completely change how e-commerce and how designers of e-commerce sites maybe have to think about their strategies. Because if people are starting to use AI chatbots more and more, like Copilot, like ChatGPT, and we're starting to put the shopping experience in there, and we're putting even the checkout experience, what does that mean for the e-commerce user experience that have been so carefully crafted by many designers on their own products' websites? What do you think about this?
And I mean, not only just the designers that are doing it, kind of their smaller scale websites or kind of across the board, but I mean, these massive companies like Amazon, which has spent decades slowly refining that checkout process. So yeah, this is a huge shift, I think, in UX design when it comes to e-commerce. I don't even know how this is gonna work. I mean, I'm like, how do you start to do things like comparison shop, and am I gonna have to like describe everything very well, or is it just a simple like, hey, show me every Razer, and it's gonna go out and look across 5 different sites and bring me back what kind of Razer it thinks I want? This is gonna be a huge shift. How do you even start to do this?
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point here on this idea of like comparison shopping, because actually I'm reading here on the news, they're talking about brand agents. So the idea is, it sounds like Microsoft is going to give teams sort of an ability to create a brand agent. So that's something that, as they say, speaks in your brand's voice and guides customers naturally from curiosity to purchase. So that seems pretty reasonable to me. And actually, we have people who've been doing conversational UX design, and I could totally imagine that companies can tool up and designers can start thinking about what their brand agent's going to be. But just like you were saying, if I'm shopping for, say, a Razer, am I getting Gillette's brand agent immediately? And if I'm another Razer company, am I getting beat out because Gillette's team has a better brand agent? Or are these AI systems, which, again, the designers don't have control over Copilot, how are they going to start bringing up, recommending different products and bringing different brand agents in? Does someone have to have the experience all the way to saying, okay, now I want to buy a Gillette Razor, or I want to talk about Gillette Razors, and now I get a Gillette brand experience? So it's going to be really interesting to see how Copilot, and arguably how Microsoft, starts allowing conversations to lead people to certain products, and then how certain brand agents get brought up.
Yeah, and will it be something like Microsoft has a deal with Gillette, and ergo, Gillette really is a really good razor and is very highly recommended. Is it going to be that? You could definitely see that with something like Google, or Meta, or if this spreads to Amazon, which I'm sure eventually it will, and where they paid for sponsored content or they paid for sponsored ads. I can't imagine that this thing is going to end up being a very neutral agent experience for you. How do you know when Gillette has a deal with you? I guess that's something that will have to be disclosed at some point. Well, one would hope.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking here and it actually says, for example, a customer might start with, what would be a good gift for my mom? and then says the agent responds in your brand's voice. So from there, a brand agent, a specific brand agent is going to be brought up here. Now, I could totally imagine a mix of brand agents coming up. So if you say, what's a great gift? You could imagine it saying, oh, there's these top 5 gifts for mothers everywhere. And maybe you even as a user say, oh, I'd like to hear more about that. And then I'm introduced to the brand agent. And that could be, for example, a little bit more equal for players. And that kind of mimics the kind of what experience is right now. Like if I go into a chatbot now and say, hey, what are some top gifts? It will probably give me a list of those things. And then I might ask questions about that. And so in that perspective, if you're imagining that the first experience is happening in the chatbot to sort of expose customers to certain things, the moment I decide I want to talk about a certain product, that's when a brand agent gets pulled up. I mean, that could be a great experience. And the cool thing about that from a design perspective is now your UX team is going to have more control over that experience that the customer's having, as opposed to just hoping that Microsoft or OpenAI or Google's chatbot is going to represent your brand well. So I see why they're doing this. I mean, I see why this could make sense, but it is going to be interesting to see how certain products get uplifted. How do they get discovered?
And then how are they displayed? Are designers going to have to make a new display for each one of these platforms? Or is there going to be a standardized thing? Which probably maybe leads us to our next topic, which is the Google A2UI, to generate these kind of rich and interactive user interfaces just on the fly. And so if this is adopted widely, this could be something where I'm just providing assets, or I'm just providing a design system or components that then the AI is just assembling on the fly for this based on the brand agent. Brand agent's such a weird thing. I don't it's such a weird name for it. Does the article talk about brand agents, brand being like Etsy, or is it more like brand agent as Gillette? Currently, it says there's retailers like Urban Outfitters, Anthropologie, Etsy, and Shopify.
Yeah, I mean, I think brand is brand in the way we kind of think about it, is sort of at the company level. I mean, it's interesting. So I should say, actually, Etsy is a weird one because Etsy is a marketplace in and of itself.
Right.
So every Etsy seller is an individual representative. So are they going to have any say over how the Etsy brand agent represents their products? Or is it simply, in their case, that it's the Etsy brand? Like for Urban Outfitters, Anthropologie, that makes more sense, right? That's sort of your standard branding, and one agent can represent the entire company in this chat interaction. But yeah, Etsy's is an interesting one. I wonder what it's going to be like, and if that's going to mean that Etsy sellers have to provide information for a brand agent to be able to represent their product in a accurate and good way.
I mean, is this going to be the end of Etsy or things like this because why would I, an individual seller, need an Etsy? Couldn't the Copilot just go find my stuff? Or I don't know. It seemed, I can see why Shopify would be on here because they power payment, but Etsy doesn't have its own payment engine.
Well, and Shopify also powers people's small business sites, right?
Yeah.
Shopify, Stripe. So having these as partners, arguably, that's an interesting question, right? Do you need Etsy or do you need other marketplaces? Does the chatbot become a marketplace? And now you're designing for the chatbot marketplace as opposed for designing for other marketplaces or designing your own experience. I mean, my sense is this is an addition. People are going to need to design their own in-house, fully controlled brand experience, fully controlled e-commerce experience. But now you've got to add this to the list of design work that you need to do. You've got to design now for this chat-based shopping experience where you're creating arguably this brand agent and the assets that are going to work within a chat. And I agree. I think this does lead really well to that second story on Google's A2UI, which is in chat interfaces, oftentimes language isn't enough, text isn't enough, and you just want sometimes a graphical interface. I think people have been thinking about this for a while. People have been exploring this. And yeah, to me, This story and this development from Google seems like the first kind of big push to try to maybe create a standard or create systems that would allow designers to really operate. Right now, you'd kind of have to build this yourself if you wanted to add this. And there are tools out there that let you do that. But I think by having a big player like Google do this, this is kind of them setting their mark as like, well, we want people to build on this. And arguably, I can imagine that this is going to be something that we'll start seeing in the Gemini ecosystem.
100%. I can definitely see this being used first in Gemini, and then they're gonna try to see who else can adopt it, because you're right, this has been a dream of UI designers and HCI professionals, for particularly at HCI, for like decades. Just give me just enough interface to do the little thing that I want and customize it to me and tailor it to me and personalize it, and then done. It's For me, it was kind of crazy that they dropped this kind of at the very end of the year, like, okay, here's a thing that changes everything about design, but have a good year, everybody. So I think that this is a really interesting thing, and I wonder how widely it's going to be adopted. Last year people were definitely talking a lot about this. People saying that there was going to be the end of user interface because the AI will just always be generating its own interface over and over depending on what you need. And I am pretty skeptical about that it's going to generate interfaces for us, that it knows what we need. I don't think we're there yet, and I don't even know if we'll ever be there. But I think this is an interesting experiment and an interesting step forward that I think will be pretty cool if it gets widely adopted. And it would solve some of these problems of, do I have to design the AI-ified version of this across Meta, Google, Apple, Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, and the list goes on, because that would be really annoying.
Yeah, and I think from a design perspective too, again, how do you control as a designer the experience that people have? I mean, so much I think of a lot of what we do as designers is trying to craft an experience for people that we have a lot of control over, that we know what they should expect, we know what's going to happen.
We know the words. We know the color palette. We know all those things.
And I think designers are probably starting to get used to the idea that, oh, yeah, I mean, I can design conversations and I don't have full control over them, but I can sort of steer them in a certain way. I think we're figuring that out. I think designers are learning strategies to do that. And we're starting to see how that is becoming more of a trend. But now, pulling it into the user interface area, right? I think it's a big change. I'm curious, Dan, like, what are your thoughts on, like, what is this going to look like as a designer? Like, what work are you going to do to kind of create these things?
So there's a big push right now that's all about, how do you start to make your design system AI readable? And I'm wondering how much of this will be whether it takes your AI readable components from your design system and starts to put these things together, or if it's something like Google, is it just using material design to piece together these user interfaces, and you just have to include a lot of logic wrapped around that, like, hey, this piece goes with that piece, don't ever show this without that. I don't know. I think that's the big missing question. I know Microsoft last year was experimenting with these things called, like, dynamic cards, I think is the name of them, where again it was just kind of components that could be put together almost like Lego pieces in these kind of building blocks. And I wonder if it's going to start looking something like that, where if you're anthropology or urban outfitters or whatever, you hand, here's our set of building blocks. There's some kind of metadata wrapper around. Here's what it looks like when we show shirts. And you have to ask these questions when you show shirts. And so there needs to be a drop down that small, medium, extra large, those kinds of things. Do you hand a whole bunch of rules over to the system?
Yeah, one of the things that you're making me think of is actually that this may be an additional aspect to our responsive design
Oh, yeah.
work, right? That basically we're going to move from desktop to mobile to now chatbot. One thing I'm wondering is, does this cardify like the internet? Because what we're seeing here, if you actually look at the pictures from the article, they show cards. I mean, it's a card interface and
Hmm.
everything is a card.
Right.
And, you know, I think that works well on mobile. I think there's been a lot of things where we are moving to sort of cards as a core component and then filling those cards. But I wonder if we're going to see things push much, much further. Or is this the start of something and this is really going to get good enough that no, you could be on full desktop and we can design an entire user interface that isn't cards. It's using all kinds of components. It's got all kinds of different layout. Is that going to be something that we're moving towards?
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I can pretty easily imagine that, right? Where you have, well, if you're on desktop, show these components. If you're not, have this. Or their components are just responsive, as you're saying. They just stretch and grow, and hey, use the big buttons if you're here or there. Let's move on and do our last news item. Those of you who don't know, the Consumer Electronics Show is happening in Las Vegas, or maybe it just wrapped up by the time you are listening to this. And every year, consumer electronics folks all gather in Las Vegas to show off their latest and greatest. And of course, last couple of years, there has been some AI powered items in here, and I thought this one was kind of interesting and silly, which is that the company Razer showed off a holographic AI desk companion, and it's a device that's in it's a small tube that displays this holographic avatar, connects to your PC with a USB cable, and it has a microphones and speaker and camera. And so the little AI avatar can talk and listen to you and react to its surroundings. It's this little genie in a bottle kind of thing. I mean, you can choose different personas for it. So you can have little anime characters, or you can have something that seems more realistic. And I don't know. I thought this was kind of fun. It's just this idea of like, what are ways that people are trying to make these AI assistants more tangible? And I thought that was kind of interesting as we start thinking about what are some like AI hardwares that could come out, because everything has been kind of AI in the background for the hardware. The AI is listening, or it's on a pin, or it's on, but this is like an AI with a face sitting on your desk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is an interesting experiment. AI hardware and really in putting personas onto AI. I mean, when you look at the site, so when you check out Project Ava from Razer, you can see that they've got a couple different personas. Many of them are either kind of cartoon characters, but they're trying to be, fully sort of human-like. Except for they do have the one sort of glowing orb, sci-fi assistant. And it'll be interesting to see, right? If people get this, if they start using it, what do they gravitate towards? Like, there's something to be said, right? One of the interesting things about the embodiment aspect of it is that you can add all kinds of physical gesture, and that can be part of the design of the experience, which is something that you can kind of do, right, with sort of motion graphic design when you use these sort of the floating orb sci-fi. But it'll be
Oh,
really interesting to see what people actually gravitate towards. I'll say this though really also again changes, like, as a designer of experiences, like if you're utilizing say an Ava as a consumer, if you're utilizing it and then maybe asking the question of, hey, what product should I buy? Could you help me find some gifts? And now do you have a brand agent that is sort of taking on the persona of these Razer personas, and now you have to mix the Razer persona with the brand agent to make sure it's giving information. And now you've got sort of this, I don't know, is it like collaborative like user experience, or does one take precedent over the other? Because for
right.
example, yeah, I mean that's something now that really adds a lot of complication to things. So it'd be interesting to see how designers start engaging with this. Are their experiences going to be sort of embodied by these agents, or is Razer primarily focusing on sort of these agents do something else? But I imagine at some point they're going to want to have those type of integrations.
Right. I mean, if I've got this thing sitting here on my desk, why wouldn't I use it for the kinds of things that I would use Alexa for right now? Or You could just ask it, hey, buy me the plane tickets or book a calendar invite with Bob or whatever it is.
Well, I can tell you, I want Clippy. I want
Okay.
Clippy on my desk all the time.
All right.
That's what I want to see. So, yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I do think this is an interesting exploration of hardware enabled AI and sort of getting AI out of your phone, out of your computer screen, and actually into the physical world. This one's, of course, limited to being something on your desk, as opposed to some of the other experiments in hardware AI that we've seen, which are portable, wearable.
Hmm.
No, so this is something, right? It's private. It's something that lives, in your space, other people. There's likely less risk here in regards to it hearing others or knowing about others. So in that way, I mean, I think it kind of gets away from some of the other challenges that AI hardware has had and is kind of dealing with now. So it'll be interesting to see, if people get it, what the actual first reviews from real customers are.
All right, let's move on to our special topic for today. And since it is the beginning of January, of course, we got to jump on that January bandwagon and talk about some predictions for 2026. Where do we think AI and design are headed this year? You want to take a prediction, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I think this dovetails really nicely with the news articles that we're seeing, right? Generative UI is, I think, something that we're going to start seeing a lot more of in 2026, partly because the software systems are getting good enough now, right? I had actually played around with some generative AI stuff like last year, and it was not entirely there yet. It was still pretty hard to control the actual components that you were using. They'd get rendered, but it wouldn't always put things with things like Google's A2UI coming out as potentially a standard, with other players, maybe introducing their systems to the market. And honestly, just with AI code agents getting better and better sort of every day. And I think that at least for simple things, for like the just enough interface experiences, right? The buying tickets, scheduling something, picking something out from a store and purchasing it, like those things, I imagine we're going to start seeing pretty usable design patterns that evolve and exist. And we're going to start seeing this a lot more. And I think you'll probably start seeing this across a lot of the major chatbot providers. It'll be interesting to see if for companies that are trying to develop their own systems, so rather than integrating with a chatbot, but they have an AI enhanced experience that they're designing, are they going to start leveraging these generative UI capabilities as well? And they're going to start building it into their products.
Hmm. Yep, that'll be a really interesting thing to see. We've been exploring a little bit in this area. I'm teaching this class called UI for AI, and we've been exploring this kind of stuff. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see it come to life this next year. My first prediction is that maybe this is a prediction that has already come true, is that we'll see a successful app that's entirely vibe coded. By successful, I'm trying to think like, well, is it something that's like out there and we know that this is vibe coded and we know that this was made kind of on the fly and maybe was made for one person's like really niche thing gets and it gets a lot of traction all of a sudden. And now I don't know whether this could have already happened. I don't know, but I haven't seen any stories about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen different stories of like games. There's been really cool game experiences that are being basically fully vibe coded and they have thousands of users playing them. But I do think that those are still feel a little more in the experiment space. Like, I guess I would probably say that like a successful app is got to be something where there's a full user experience that people return to, right? They're going to keep coming back to. It's not just a one time, oh, I played that game. I heard it was AI vibe coded. I played it. But no, that maybe like I would say like thousands and thousands of people are continuously using this application, right?
Maybe paying for it.
I guess a question here, right? I mean, this is always a question of like in from a design perspective. It could be successful design, but is it successful design if it's not making money? And so I think maybe that's another line that we might want to think about right there, is that it's actually something that's generating value, it's generating monetary value, it's generating user value. But I do think I think that this one probably could come true, at least on a scale of like thousands and thousands of users. To see it maybe at like millions of users, I'm not entirely sure on that yet. And the fact that it's entirely vibe coded, I mean, we are getting closer to being able to do a lot, right? There's a lot of vibe coding systems, a lot of players are starting to have integrations with AI code assistants, right? You've got companies like Supabase that are trying to make, their backend database systems, right? Vercel, big player in this space, right? Making it sort of easy to be able to do this kind of stuff and launch your site, but also to integrate its tools so that you can basically, the AI code assistants can build with them. This year, we're definitely going to see a lot of infrastructure providers. The companies that are the building blocks of what we build our designs on, they're definitely, I think, going to ramp up. I think you're going to see those systems, players who are integrating more with AI code assistants, that their stuff's going to start getting adopted more because of this. Even if it's not an entirely vibe coded app, the fact that I can go in and say, hey, put a backend in here, get some user authentication, get some user accounts, and that can all be with a provider who has a really good integration with a code assistant. And I don't have to spend all my time, especially if I'm a solo designer, if I'm a small team, if we don't have all of that. I think that that is going to be a big enabler, and that's going to at least get us a lot closer to sort of the entirely vibe coded.
Mm-hmm.
So now this brings up another point, though, which is what are all the UX designers going to be doing? Arguably, there is a bit of a UX career crisis. Dan, you've got more experience than I do in the industry, but you've also seen a lot more. I mean, what does this look like to you? Do you think is this a blip? Do you think it's going to get better? Do you think it's going to get worse?
I think there's a crisis happening now that is at the bottom rung of the UX career ladder has really been eroded a lot, in that a lot of the places where you would be doing kind of production level work and just kind of getting your feet wet, a lot of that is gone. There's room for like senior designers, and then there's room for like very senior designers, and just not much room right now for entry level designers. And I think that that's going to continue in 2026. Now, I do think that there are going to be these kind of merging of some roles that's going to continue to happening. This merged role of product manager, designer, and engineer, maybe doing something that's called, a product engineer, or a building designer, or some other job title that we don't have yet, that is all about basically being able to get from zero to launch, at least with some low level projects, or low level features in a larger on a larger tech stack. And then I think there's going to be, really senior designers who are really great at things like knowing customers, knowing users, knowing contexts, that are dreaming up new features, that are doing more design strategy work, who know their space really well. But that does leave this problem of the how do you get started here? And I think a lot of people who are not coming in with some of this building designer stuff are going to be at an advantage. And I just see this as a problem that's not going away. And I don't know how we keep getting new people into the profession. And certainly for us, teaching at a university, teaching people that are entering the field or repositioning their careers to join the field, is really challenging to give them that boost up and give them all the tools that they need to have now to be successful. Because I think just the days of getting a great design degree, or especially the days of going through a UX boot camp and getting a job, I think those days are gone, probably for good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm teaching a class this semester called the AI Augmented Designer, and the whole class is about how do you incorporate AI into your design process in a way that helps make you, better, and hopefully helps you to produce better design. That's really the goal. But I've had students, telling me, for example, that they're seeing on job requirements like must have experience with vibe coding. I mean, I find that to be astonishing in a way because, I mean, the term didn't even exist, at the beginning of last year.
Right.
Um, and now all of a sudden it's a job requirement for folks. At the same time, I mean, maybe it's a shift from like, oh, well, should have some developer experience. One of the things that I think is pretty cool about maybe this shift, though, is that vibe coding experience, depending on how a company defines that and how they sort of think about it, it may be more accessible to folks because steering these AI systems that can write pretty good code, especially if you're working with a design system, is something that actually people can pick up, I think, faster. I think people can learn to become pretty proficient with faster because oftentimes what you're doing is this really fast iterative loop where you're evaluating the interface and the experience that you're getting from a vibe coded system. And then you're having this conversation with an AI to sort of update that. And I think actually a lot of designers can work really well in that. So I wonder if as industry starts to incorporate that, as they maybe start to see the value of being able to do that, whether it's for product prototyping, for testing, for just getting new ideas created, we might start to see that this is something that actually becomes a growing aspect for UX designers. And so maybe companies will recognize it's actually a lot of it's going to be about that taste. That when many people can do this, it's going to be about the people who can do it really well, which of course has often been the case with design, right? It's not just, our field is about craft, but our field is also about taste. And so I think that that's still going to be really important. But yeah, I'm interested to see how that goes and where this goes. I don't know if it's going to get worse, but I definitely know it's changing. Like I said, my students are telling me, they're seeing all kinds of new requirements on their job postings. So I think it's going to be an interesting year to see how that changes.
Entry-level job requirement, 3 to 5 years of vibe coding. I can see it now. 2 more quick predictions. We're going to see more and more Figma starting to morph more and more towards being a full stack delivery operating system. I think the introduction last year of Figma Sites and Figma Make was a way into this, and I think that's just going to be getting better and better. And now, of course, they do have a lot of competition in this space, but starting with the tools that designers know, which is Figma, starting to bootstrap off that and scaffold off that until they're doing a lot of the engineering, quote unquote, right there in Figma, I think it is a big advantage for them to do some really interesting things on that. What's your take on that, Nick?
Well, I mean, Figma for many years has kind of become a standard platform for design work. Our students are using Figma, and I think that with the introduction of these new tools, Figma Make, it could possibly be where designers want to stay and where they want to work, and they're going to continue to say, I want to work in Figma. The interesting thing here to me, right, is that how much can Figma differentiate itself from other, arguably, AI code generation? Now, the interesting thing that Figma has is they're a design, highly design-driven organization. And so I think they might, the things that they're putting out might resonate more with designers. They might have a better design sense. Again, getting back to that idea of taste. I mean, and this is something, for example, that we've been seeing with like the student work. Students are trying all kinds of tools, and a lot of them are gravitating towards, say, Figma Make for, it's creating better front ends. It's creating front ends that I prefer. I'm able to steer it to create front ends. Where they then sometimes get stuck is maybe on the rest of the interaction, on sort of those more programmatic aspects of the experience. And what students in my class are doing is they're using a bunch of things, right? They're doing front-end Figma Make. They pull down the code. They throw that into VS Code with Copilot, and then they're editing the code there to kind of update things to, actually get, say all their transitions working, to get all the micro interactions working really well. But then they might hop back into Figma Make to sort of polish up front end. So it's going to be really interesting to see what is sort of the differentiator, and is that enough of a differentiator for people to want to stay in Figma, or do people catch up in regards to creating great front-end design experiences? And then it's just a matter of, you pick the code editor that you prefer. You pick your AI code agent as you prefer.
Right. Yeah, I don't see a lot of people moving from Claude or Cursor over to Figma to do that, but I guess we'll see. One last prediction.
Yeah, so also kind of dovetailing with that Razer announcement, I personally think we're going to start seeing more AI first hardware experiences. I know that in the last couple of years, we've had some, hard knocks in some ways with different products coming out and not being as successful as maybe the media had made them out to be,
You're
thinking
not
of like,
wearing a humane pin right now?
I am not wearing a humane pin. I don't have my rabbit with me. I don't have a friend. But I think that all of these are sort of these early day experiments and new ways of trying to get AI out of our phones and out of our desktops. So I imagine we're going to see a lot more experimentation. Razer, in many ways, right? This is like the first drop of sort of new hardware that it's embodying an AI agent in a piece of hardware. I think we're going to see more of this. I would argue, sort of, my prediction is I don't think anyone's going to be a dominant market player in this space. I don't think this is the year that we're going to see AI first hardware really, really take off. I think we're going to see more experiments. We're going to see more interesting things. We might even get some stuff that gets some uptake, and people start getting more used to it. But I don't think this is going to be the year that anything goes off like a rocket ship.
My one caveat with this is that Meta confirmed that it was delaying any international launches of the Ray-Ban display glasses because those were really taking off, so they can't make enough of them. And so is this the year of smart glasses? It's moving from, hey, this is something I might wear sometimes, to like, hey, I'd like to wear this daily. So I think that's a pretty interesting signal to me, and I wonder if this will be the year that we start to see a lot more in the smart glass category. I know Google last year at I/O announced the return of Google Glass with Warby Parker as one of their partners, and so it'd be interesting to see if that hardware finally takes off.
Yeah, and one aspect of that too is the fact that there's a lot of features that are not arguably AI features in smart glasses. I think having AI embedded into it is a new add that potentially maybe that is the value
Right.
proposition that's going to take it over. But I also wonder if people are just sort of getting more comfortable with even the original value proposition of smart glasses. And now it's just, yeah, this is working for us now. People are picking it up. So it'll be interesting to see in some ways, like, is it the AI features, or is this basically the way that the AI features, they do get out and it's actually going to be through the smart glasses? Is that the form factor that kind of works?
And with that, that ends our first episode here at AI and Design. We will see you next week with another set of news and hopefully a big topic to discuss. Not hopefully, we will have a big topic to discuss. It'll be something good. Bye, everyone.